Hey lighting people, I have big news. GrandMA3 version 2.4 is out, and it is everything we've been hoping for. Or at least, I don't know if your wish list was different than mine, but I think it's pretty cool. And I have spent some time this morning reading through the release notes. I have played with it, and it's amazing. We have single shot. It's even cooler than single shot. It's called NShot, and you can do whatever kinds of versions you want. It's amazing. We have shapes. We have phasers in the recipe editor. We have phaser recipes. There are so many cool things, and I absolutely cannot wait to explain all of these things to you. So let's get started. So obviously the first thing we have to go over is phaser recipes. I mean, duh. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to delete most of these windows, and I'm just going to make my recipe editor full screen. You'll see why in a minute, because there's a lot of new stuff and it's a lot more useful full screen. So the first thing is we actually have separate types of recipes. We have standard recipes and we have phaser recipes. So if I go to create a new recipe, I get to choose if I want a standard recipe or a phaser recipe, and they're color coded. So a standard recipe is going to be green, and a phaser recipe, oops, I accidentally clicked the wrong one. Phaser recipe is going to be purple. That's pretty intuitive. Obviously, as you can see, this looks a little bit different here now because, well, it's a recipe. And the first thing I want to just assure you of is this editor is super intuitive. Like, I thought it was going to be this huge learning curve, and it's not. It's crazy easy. We have cut, copy, paste, but we also have this new thing called the context menu, which you can turn on in the settings, context area. And now we get this thing down here, which you can adjust the size of it, but it is going to give us a whole bunch of things. It has quick shortcuts to add a standard recipe or add a phaser recipe, to insert a step, or add a value source. We'll get into all of that, of course, to adjust the shape or adjust a matrix, and we can also add a programmer part down here. So what I'm going to do real fast is I'm going to delete these, and we're just going to focus on our phaser recipe. Actually, okay, never mind. I'm going to create another standard recipe, and I'm going to just show you some of the differences in what we have in options for the columns. So there have been some changes. We have steps, obviously, are only available for phasers. We have our selection instead of group. This has changed now. Values is going to be not available for phasers because they show up differently for phasers. That was one of the things that took me a minute to figure out. Values are separate. They're not in this column, but you can have a value for the standard recipe here. And as you can kind of already see, one of the things that we get with this context area is we have our pools come up when we click on the values thing, which is really cool. We also have a sheet view for the contents of those pools that we can now select. So to move on, we obviously have certain things that are not available in standard recipes. We have our attributes for the phaser recipes, and we'll go in depth in this a little bit more in a minute. But here's where you're going to put your values. You have absolute or relative values, so you're not bound to presets. Although you can use presets, you're not stuck to them. So you can also just put straight values in here. Can't do that in standard recipes, but you can in phaser recipes. Then the attributes, you're going to be selecting an attribute for this value source. Again, I'll go over that a little bit more in a minute. Speed has changed. We only have speed and phase visible here. If we want to change other matrix values, we have to do that in this section, which pulls up this whole matrix editor, and we can change it all here, and then it'll kind of show us some data in here about it, but it's not showing up like it did before. Now, personally, I love this. I think it's so much easier to navigate. It's less confusing because your matrix settings look the same everywhere that you're changing them. You always get the same menu. Furthermore, it was just so many columns, you know, like that's literally, it was insane. Scrolling through all of those columns for all these different settings, this is way better. So we have that. For our phaser section, of course, we have measure, which was not something we had any ability to change in phaser recipes or in recipes in general before, so that's cool. And then we have NShot direction, that was the other thing I forgot to mention at the beginning. We have bounce, and I know so many people have been absolutely just like desperate for this. Well, we have it, and it's awesome. So we've got that. We've got these adaptive settings, which I will talk about in a little bit. So that's kind of the differences between standard recipes and phaser recipes. Okay, one other thing I'd like to mention is in the phaser pop-up, we have a 0 degree quick option. I love that. I have been missing that. Why do I have to type 0 every time, you know? Okay, well, now we have it. So that's cool. Let's talk about value sources. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this standard recipe, and we're just going to focus on the phaser recipe for now. So value source. This also was a little bit confusing to me at first, but it's not that complicated. So what you need to do is select an attribute. Let's say I'll do a dimmer, and actually let me pull up my 3D view on my other screen so that we can see what's going on here. Okay, so also, okay, that was not what I was intending to do. Phaser recipe. Apparently if you clear out, that also removes whatever you have in the recipe editor. So, right. So let's do, I need a selection, and yes, that also pulls up your groups pool here. Selection, then I need, let's not do shape yet. Attributes, I'll go with dimmer, and then I'm going to give it a value of, I'm just going to go with straight values in this case, even though I could use presets. And, oops, I accidentally have both selected, that's dumb. So this is step 1 and step 2. And now they are dimming. Then I need, and of course you could do relative as well. The curve by default is linear, and you can edit this to any of these, but you also have the shape option. And then I wouldn't change these here because also, oh wait, these just opened this. Okay, fascinating. I didn't actually realize that before. All right, and then a matrix, you have the option to select an matrix pool object. In that case, what happens is it just puts those values in here, but you can still edit things here and that'll overwrite whatever was in the matrix that you selected. And then you can change all this stuff here. So right now it's showing us that this matrix object is selected. If I, let's see, maybe do 3 wings, it's going to show us that right here. So we can see all of that information right here. It's very condensed compared to what we saw before. You can also collapse this. It just, wait, what is it doing exactly? Oh, it's adding, okay, so this is our old view. I don't know why I couldn't tell that it was doing that. Okay, so this is the collapsed view, but you can also open up all of the columns, which I don't think I need them. So we've got that for our matrix. Let's add shape into the mix, shall we? So if you click on shape, you have an editor down here. So you can still change like the transition width, accel, decel manually, but this is not going to be like the easiest way to do it. We also have a sheet and a pool, and you can right click and find them here. But we have all of these predefined ones that they've created, and some of them give you certain attributes. You can see that down here. All right, so let's select assign, and that goes ahead and changes everything. It sets the curve, it sets all of the other values. You can change them. So we've got that going. Now let's say, what if I want to add something else to this other than dimmer? What you would do is add a value source. So you can do that right here, add value source, and then you have to select a attribute, select an attribute here. So let's say I want to do a pan, then, oh, that's dumb because I actually don't have any tilt values here. Well, I can change it. Let's go to tilt, and it does change it for all of the stuff. And then it's giving it some automatic values here, which I still haven't fully figured out all of the details of why when it does that. I think it's doing that because it needs to give it a value because you already have a phaser running. It may be because of the fact that we have a sign assigned, because I know the shape will do that. So There you go. Then you can change those things as well. Let's talk about flyouts. So easy, I promise you. All right, add a phaser recipe. We've got our step 1, step 2, selection. Instead of adding attributes, the first step is I'm going to select shape and I'm going to go with flyout. Now you can see it has dimmer and position both included here. All right. So I turn that on and it's already running a flyout because it put in default values. Whenever you add the shape, it adds all the value sources it thinks you might need and it gives you some default values. Now I don't want value source 3, so I'm going to select it and hit the minus, and then we're just going to do a tilt, right? So these values are pretty bad. Let's say if I go 70, oh wait, no, this is relative. I don't want a relative. Let's do 75 to 50. And there we go. Now they're doing a flyout. And let's see here. Let's add some matrix. Now I'm going to show you something cool. All right, you can change the direction. You can do forward, backward. So now we've got a waterfall. Converted it that easily. That's insane. Or you can alternate. This is like our bounce. So it goes through all the way going out and then all the way going in. And it can do that with whatever effect you want. You could do a left to right dimmer, whatever you want. So we have our bounce. And then another thing that you can do is NShot. You can set this to any value. Unlimited is the default, and that you can also put it back in, or you can remove, but then it's still unlimited, which means it keeps going. If you set it to less than 1, you can. It will just run through that percentage of the steps. So if you have 4 steps and you set it to 0.75, then it'll do the first 3 steps and then it will stop. So if I do this once, it will go through 1 time and then it will stop. Or you could set it to 2 or 5 or however many times you want. So, I mean, that's pretty neat. Okay, let's go back to nothing here. And then, obviously, you can change measure here. So let's talk about adaptive measure and adaptive width, because that's a new thing. So adaptive measure is going to change the measure to the number of fixtures you have selected. By default, it does it on the x-axis. If you change this, I guess you can change it to absolutely any type of direction, and then it's going to go based on like the number of fixtures in that direction. Let's go back to 0. And then adaptive width is going to change it to a division of, again, the number of fixtures you have, or like grid spaces taken up on the x-axis by default. And what that allows you to do is basically, like, you can see what it's doing right now. It's basically like a, it is like a, what's the word now? I am losing the word. It was, in MA2, there was a term for this. A chase. Oh, yes. So it's like a chase, but it is dependent on, so with a linear grid, it would be a chase. If you have them spread out, it would be one grid space at a time. Another thing that we do seem to have is a working circle, but I'm not going to show you that. I think that's about it for the recipe phasers in the recipe editor. I mean, I'm sure there's more playing around with it you could do, but that's all I'm going to go over for right now. I will make the comment that, yes, you can create your own shapes, and that seems like it's a whole thing. I have not looked into it. I have a ton of stuff on my plate right now, and I just wanted to make this video as quickly as possible. I feel like there's a ton of basic shapes, so you can pretty much work with that. I'm going to plan for my next video to be really diving into editing and creating shapes. That way we can explore that together, but it's not my highest priority at the moment. Okay, actually one other thing that I did want to mention about this is there's no Speedmaster in the phaser, recipe phaser. So that bothers me, because that means that you can't link a phaser recipe to a Speedmaster, meaning if you want to do that, you have to either create phasers the old way, which is still possible, by the way, or you would have to store it in a sequence and link that to a Speedmaster, which works until you have different phasers, like different attributes that you want linked to different Speedmasters. So for example, my executors that I use that are just the effects, I could do that with. As far as programming into cues, that's going to be a struggle. I either have to not use a Speedmaster or I have to create my phasers the old way. So that's one downside. I really hope they add that because I really feel like that's a need, but we'll see. Another side note I'm going to make kind of related to recipes is, let's go and open up a preset pool, recipe phasers, edit setting. In this menu, you can now completely adjust how this is showing up, which is amazing. Also, you have the same kinds of options in this editor as you have in the recipe editor. You don't have it in the sequence sheet, however. Okay. Another thing I'm going to hit while I'm here is preset mode. You can change a preset mode to whatever you want after the fact. You can store a preset as selective and then change it to universal or global. So that's cool. Another thing with that is we have some changes to the universal fixture type. So let's go into the patch and have a quick look at that. So fixture type, they've changed the universal ID type to generic. So it's now called generic instead of universal. And this is now an editable fixture. So we can go in here and we can edit this as much as we would like. And this does introduce some slight differences in just the way things are working behind the scenes, but it does give you more flexibility. So you can go read the release notes for more information on that, but pretty interesting. Let's talk about another thing to do with presets, and that's going to be list ref depth. So list reference, you might be familiar with. Let me turn off my keyboard shortcuts and type this in because I don't know the shortcut if there is one. All right, list ref. I'm gonna select one of these, and now you can see how deep this is referencing things. So basically, there's a depth of 2 as to like an item is being referenced by this preset, and something else is referencing that. Whereas with this one, it's only 1. So this is directly referencing this preset. You have the same thing on this, where with the depends on, these all have a depth of 0. So yeah. So you can see that information kind of helps you know a little bit more about what's going on with your presets when you have a chain of references. And I think there's also a max depth, and it'll alert you if you're at the max depth, and if you store more beyond that, then recasts and stuff won't work properly. Okay, keyboard shortcuts back on because I prefer them on as a general rule. And what else have we got on our list? Phone tethering. Okay, that's something that I haven't tried, I haven't done. I would say it would work very differently on a PC. It's specifically for consoles, but you can plug your phone into the console with a USB cable, and you can now access the world server for importing fixture types by doing that. So that's pretty neat. Now you no longer have to have your console directly connected to that in order to import fixture types. So that's cool. Recursive lock and unlock. So this is a neat little thing that lets you lock whole pools differently. So for example, if I want to lock this whole preset pool, I could do lock preset 23 and it would lock the whole pool. But what you can do is you can do lock preset 23 slash okay, what's this index? Slash recursive? Yes. Okay, so it's locking down all the levels. So it is locking the pools, the pool objects, and it's locking the recipes inside of those. Okay, so I can proceed. It also works with unlock, so that's not as terrifying as you might think. Okay, unlock preset 23 slash recursive. It would unlock everything. Yes. Okay. So that's pretty neat. Another thing is some pools have something called a first index. I don't believe presets do. Presets do. Okay. So you can set this first index, and then whatever you set it to will be the default beginning for when you store new objects. So I'm thinking I'm going to use this in the sequence pool, because when it comes to using sequences, so here's how it works, right? If you store a new object without specifying an ID, it goes to the next empty object. This makes it start looking for next empty object at a different place than one. So let's say I'm programming and I'm going to be storing some stuff just by store clicking executor. Normally it would fill them up starting here. What if I want to put those in a new location? Let's say I want to put them here. Okay, let's start at 305. First index 305, please. Now store sequence. It started at 305. Store sequence. I could just use the shortcut. Okay. Now it did 306. So that is going to give you more flexibility with organization, and I'm thrilled with that. I'm going to set this back to 1 just so I don't get confused or forget about it, but that's cool. Another thing is CMD indicator. So in our queues, we now have this little, it says CMD. That means that we have a valid command that is active and not disabled that will execute when we go to that queue. So now you can see which queues are going to be executing commands without having to see this. That's great. Another thing is the Speedmaster Learn mode. And that is going to be best shown over here. Let's pull up the playback bar, and then yeah, I'm going to click on this, and our learn mode can be default or learn respect speed scale or auto increase speed scale. So that is going to mean that when we do a learn, by default it is, I guess, not, yeah, so it's not respecting the speed scale. So if you tap whatever, it sets it without paying attention to the speed scale. So if I have it set to multiply by 2 and I'm tapping, it's going to set it, but then it's going to also multiply it. Learn respect speed scale divides it or multiplies it so that it's the right speed, like it's the exact speed you're tapping no matter what the speed scale is set to. And then auto increase speed scale means if you tap faster than what the speed scale is allowing, it will automatically increase it, same as MA2 did. So that's pretty neat. And obviously you can customize that per Speedmaster as well. So that's also great. Another thing, finally, I think this is the last thing I'm going to talk about, is preview. We finally have preview in GrandMA3. I don't know why it took this long, but we have preview and it's pretty cool. So let's talk about it. We can enter preview by tapping preview, or the keyboard shortcut is Control-Alt-P. Wait, my keyboard shortcuts aren't on. Oops. Control-Alt-P. And we have some things turn orange, but currently I don't have a sequence selected to preview. So I'm going to select a sequence to preview, and everything turns orange. You can set some windows to show the previewed objects or not. For instance, on our 3D view, we can change it to follow preview or not follow preview. I would usually have it set to follow preview. And you can see what this queue would be doing. You can advance through the queues and make changes without it going live. But as soon as you make the change, if you're on the queue, it will go live. If you're not on the queue, then it won't. Now, the one thing to note with that is we kind of don't need this if we're programming in recipes, because you can make changes in queues. But at least you can see it in this case in your 3D view if you have that pulled up. So that is a benefit that you didn't have with the old method. Also, you can make changes to things that are not in recipes. This way you can go into the encoder and you can make those changes. And you can use this in conjunction with blind if you need to. So we have all of that. And then you can obviously select different targets. And to exit out, you can either hit preview twice on the console, or it doesn't work to use the shortcut twice for some reason. I tried it. I don't know if that's a bug or intentional, but what you can do is preview off, please. And there we go. So that's how preview works. This was just an overview of some of the things that I think are the coolest in the new update, things that I've had a chance to get into, things that I use. I'm not talking about like timecode or the MIDI source updates because those aren't things that I use, but this is a really exciting update, and I can't wait to get more into it. Unfortunately, I know that I'm probably not going to be able to use it at my church for a long time, unless it's like a super stable update. I can't see us actually switching over to it for who knows how long, but it's really cool, and I'm going to definitely be working on updating my own personal show file before that and seeing where we can go with this. So that's all for today. Let me know what topics you'd like me to go more in depth on. I'm definitely going to hit shapes. Probably going to do more on phasers, but that's for another day. Let me know, again, what things you want to hear more about, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, have a great week and happy programming.